Do you see a recession? And if so, how should you position for it?
Yeah, so we are starting to hear that R word recession thrown around more and more frequently, which is a little bit concerning. Frankly, generally, when we as a collective start to hear and think recession, we begin doing irrational things, with our money, like selling out at the bottom of a market, for example. And so it is something that we're keeping an eye on. It is something we're trying to steer clients away from as best we possibly can. But frankly, anyone who's out buying anything that's touched by oil right now is experiencing that sticker shock that you mentioned. Even if you're not buying at the pump, maybe you're somebody who says, I ride a bike to work, or I drive a Tesla, so I'm not worried about oil prices. Well, those same trucks that bring all of the staples to the big box retailers that we shop at, or the grocery stores that we buy our groceries at, they're going to pass on those increased transportation prices. And that's definitely something we're likely to feel. And that all has lasting psychological effects, which then causes people to start keeping their coins in their pockets versus still being out spending, as you guys just got through saying.
Well, Malcolm, you were saying that you're trying to advise your clients against potentially selling at the bottom of the market here. What about entry points? Would you be buying any dips here?
I don't know that now is the right time to be focused on buying the dip, simply because we don't know how much longer Vladimir Putin plans to push this thing out. Also, one thing that could push that 20 to 35% number from Goldman up considerably higher is if all of a sudden, now that President Biden's expected to come out and say that they're basically cutting off all trade routes to Russia, what if Vladimir Putin decides he's no longer going to sell his oil to the rest of the world? That'll have ripple effects across Europe, which will spike oil prices by another, I don't know, $20, $30 a barrel, different estimates that I'm seeing, which will then be felt by Latin America, which will then push its way into the States, which obviously means there's still some more pain to be felt. So I don't know that I'd be jumping in here now trying to catch that falling knife.
Can I just come back to, but the knife is falling. Why shouldn't you sell at this point? Why shouldn't you go to cash at this point? There is the potential for significant further downside if the scenario you've just laid out comes to bear. Why shouldn't you take some risk off the table at this point, Malcolm?
Well, because look at the flip side. Suppose all of a sudden the sanctions that President Biden and other NATO countries have been imposing actually are felt. Or suppose all of a sudden Vladimir Putin loses his interest in this war because it's just not playing out the way that he expected it to. And all of a sudden we're able to declare victory tomorrow morning. Well, you better believe that all of a sudden the market snaps back, people's sentiments start to rise, and people are not putting pressure on the markets by selling out the way that they have been. And so there's just never any way to predict how these things will go. If we look back at 2014 when they annexed Crimea, just to get an idea of how this thing could play out, it was February, March when it happened. And then by the July 4th holiday, the markets were actually, the S&P was up 5-6% by July 4th. So it's just no way to ever know when is the right time. But I just feel like to be saying now is the time, buy the dip, buy the dip, buy the dip. We just can't.
No, I'm saying, no, wait a sec. Malcolm, I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying the opposite. Why shouldn't you get out at this point? Why should you be still invested in a market that came into this crisis still quite highly valued, has come down a bit, but why shouldn't it fall further?
Yeah, so it's the exact same response in the other direction. It's just that we have no way to know where the market is going to go day by day based on these headlines because war is unpredictable. Vladimir Putin himself is very unpredictable. And so we could see positive market forces all of a sudden show up here in the news cycle tomorrow, and you're out of the market at the time when it actually pays you then to be in. And we've all seen those charts that show, you know, if you had been in the 5 best days of the year, you would have missed out on, X% return. So it's just, it's a fool's errand to be trying to time it so perfectly because the result is never going to be perfect.
Okay, Malcolm, so if you want to stay invested here, where should you put your money that provides you the most safety, the most insulation, given the uncertainty out there?
Yeah, so what's interesting about that question is I've actually been tracking the price of Bitcoin since February 24th when Putin and Russia invaded Ukraine, wondering if this would be the first really good test to see if Bitcoin counts as that safe haven asset that we've been taught that it should be. And what was interesting is it did spike from, 34, 38,000 up above about 44. And then all of a sudden it came tumbling the last couple of weeks. At the same time, gold is actually spiking. And so it's really interesting to me as far as safe haven assets are concerned. It's not quite behaving the way that we would expect it to. But to answer your question a little more directly, we're actually seeing real estate right now as one of the safest places to be, simply because when rates are rising, as they have been for a little while, or we're told, we've been told for a while that they're going to be, real estate tends to perform pretty well in a rising rate cycle. And so that's actually where we've been seeing a lot of opportunity to at least ride this thing out, but probably see some positive return by the end of the year as well.
What about big tech?
Yeah, so big tech is a tough one to call. It feels like it should be a good time to be buying into big tech because all the larger names in the NASDAQ that actually helped keep it up got sold off, 20, 30% if you're looking at a Tesla or an Nvidia, maybe a Amazon as an example. And so it feels like it should be a good time to be jumping into big tech. But as volatile as that sector is, as the NASDAQ is, again, it goes back to what I was saying initially. I just don't feel good about encouraging folks to throw fresh powder at the markets at this moment because we just don't know where we are. So if anything, I would say be dollar cost averaging into the market. Don't throw, all your chips, go all in with all of your chips right now at this moment. But at least if you dollar cost average your way in, you're getting a little bit of the good, a little bit of the bad, and somewhere in there you find the right entry point.